So now we've all got NIFs that are replacing other items in game, and that feels pretty low budget, kind of minimum wage situation. We want to actually create items now that are unique and are actually craftable and usable in a normal capacity, not just replacing, say, the iron sword like we've done before. We want to build our own thing. So there's only 4 little steps, and with the creation kit, it's actually pretty straightforward to do. It's easy to package up. So our first step is going to be creating a first-person model entry, which essentially is just going to be the reference in the game to say, hey, use this model. The second thing we want to build is an item ID and give it a name. The item ID is what the game references under the hood. The name of the file is actually, or the name in this file is the actual string that will show up when we see it in the crafting or anywhere on the UI. Third step would be to create a weapon recipe. That's just basically making it so we can go to the forge and actually create an item. And the last will be the tempering recipe. And tempering is just the way that we can sharpen our blade at the sharpening. What the hell is it? The grindstone? We can grind on our blade a little bit. That sounds a little sketchy, but that's cool. So I want everybody to open up the creation kit. And when we open it up, we should get essentially what we have here. We're going to want to grab the data file from the original Skyrim information. So we're going to go up to File and then go to Data. And in here, all we have to do is double click the Skyrim.esm. That will actually start referencing the master file for all of the Skyrim information. So all of the quests, items, whatever, it's all stuck into this file. So we say OK. You'll see down at the bottom here there's a little timer. I'll pause while that's going. While you're loading this, it's going to give you a bunch of errors. If you just hit yes to all, you'll be fine. It's actually not your fault. It's totally Bethesda's. Hit yes to all and then just wait again. And here we have our files loaded. You'll see a cell view, render window. Neither of these are important to us right now. This is for 3D level editing stuff. What's important to us is the object window. And in the object window, up here you can see there's a filter. My plan right now is to show you how to replace, basically duplicate and edit weapons that have already been fully fleshed out. This will give us a pretty good jump off. I want to get some, like, all the stats all set up and everything. Some of the more mundane tasks will be done for you. So I'm going to just start with the Daedric sword. So I'm going to start typing in the filter Daedric sword, and you'll note right now I don't have a category selected. So what's going to happen is it's just going to it's actually going to not find content here. So what we can do is actually, if I know that I'm working on a weapon, I can actually go drill down through weapon. You can see I have most of the Daedric sword stuff here, but there are recipes and a few other items that we need to mess with outside of this. So what I'm going to do is actually just filter from all. So I'm going to select all at the very bottom here. And so you remember I told you we need to create a new first-person model. We'll do that real quick by just selecting the first-person Daedric sword. This is the reference for like the model data. So for our first-person model, if we want to use just straight up Daedric sword, we could, or we can actually create our own instance just by right-clicking and saying duplicate. And you'll note it does not populate in this list right now. We're filtered down to Daedric sword, and it doesn't auto-update. So if you just hit period or slash or any other key and then just remove it, you'll see a refilter. And now we'll have first-person Daedric sword copy 0000. If we double-click that, we'll get the opportunity to rename this. So this will be the name of our weapon. I'm going to use the same name throughout the whole thing. And in tribute to the ever horrifying Jersey Shore, I'm going to go with the situation. It's going to be my new weapon name, first person, the situation. You'll note I'm not using any punctuation or spaces, just the situation. Everything else is fine except for the model. This is going to be the first person view model. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to say edit. And in here you'll see there's a real-time view of the model that's currently selected. You'll note it is actually lit, so it's got a pretty good setup for knowing whether or not you broke something. I'll give you an example of that real quick. So if you've been trying to import models for a while, you've been getting that good exclamation point. I'm going to navigate to my weapons folder, iron. I'm going to find a model that I know will break, probably this one. You see that exclamation point we know and love. Here you can actually find out without crashing a game whether or not the item is actually working. You can actually see what it looks like after you've done all your NIF scope nonsense. So I'm going to go back in there, weapons, iron, first person longsword is going to be my weapon. Because I don't think the situation deserves a Daedric weapon. I think he's more of a low budget, low rent disaster zone. So we're going to go with that, first person longsword. And I'm just going to say okay. And now this will be the first time you'll see this next dialogue. And every time you see this, with the way that we're editing this, you always want to hit no. So we're going to say okay right here. You'll see it says you've changed the format editor ID. Do you want to create a new form? We do not actually. We already did that by copying or duplicating the object. So say no. And then this is just asking, we don't have anything referencing this particular item right now, but that's fine because we've done nothing with this yet. So we say, yeah, this one's fine. And that same sequence, no, yes, is going to be the same for each of the next steps. I'm actually going to duplicate all the other items real quick right now. Or no, I'll just do one. So the next one is the sword. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say duplicate. Once again, do our little comma dance. Make a comma, delete it. Now you'll see there's a Daedric sword copy. Looks like a Lady Gaga song. Alright, so we're going to give this a new ID. Once again, Daedric sword is unacceptable. Obviously, this is the situation. No spaces in the ID. This is, again, the reference for the game. Then the name is where we can actually do whatever we want. So in this case, the situation, that's acceptable. A couple of other things we can edit in here. If we want it to start out with an enchantment, we can. We're going to not in this case. Value, I think this man is kind of a trash bag, so I'm going to give him a value of 0. That means our weapon value in game will be 0. That's great. So it's good. Weight, what is he, about 150 pounds, something like that? Let's go with that. So this is actually the value. This is actually absurd. 150 is too big. That's the weight value for your item in game. So I'm going to give it 15. I'm just going to move that 0 over for now. And damage, I don't know if you guys have seen this show, but there was one episode where he got in a fight, and instead of actually fighting, he ran into a wall. So I'm going to give him a 0 damage, or maybe just 1. Just 1. The damage was to himself. Speed is, these are all pretty self-explanatory. Reach is how far you can swing, or you can actually make contact. Speed is going to be the speed at which it swings. Yeah, all this is pretty straightforward. The names are self-explanatory. Change them as you will. That should be fine. We do want to change, like I said, I'm downgrading this man. Right now, the weapon materials in the keywords over here says Daedric. So I'm going to actually right click and delete that. And what that is actually where the category that it shows up in the crafting. So we're going to delete that, and then we're going to add a new one. And we're going to put him down in the iron. Weapon, material, iron. There it is. You see that pops in there. Weapon, material, iron. That's great. And the last thing we need to do in our weapon, this is the actual item ID. Let's go into art and sounds. And you'll see right now our model this is our third person model now. Currently it says it's daedricsword.nif. Again, we don't want that, so I'm going to say edit. And exactly the same as before, you can see the model. I'm going to say edit. weapons iron longsword. There it is. You can see it's showing up. No errors there. Say OK. And then in this one, the first person model object is actually, now we're going to reference the last item we made, the first person of the situation. So I'm going to click it. And anytime there's a drop down like this, these are all a pain in the ass to work through. If you just start typing, you can see my cursor shows up. Oh, there's only a certain amount of time where it exists. You have to keep going. So you can see my cursor. If I keep typing, first person, did it again. First person, there he is, the situation. Hit enter. Now we're good. This is all set. You can actually change, there are other options to change, obviously. You can change weapon sounds, things of this nature, but right now, totally superfluous. We're going to just use the Daedric sounds, say OK. Once again, this is saying we've changed the form ID. We don't need a new one, so we say no. And then we say, okay, sure, yeah, reference by nothing, just say yes. And now we have two more things to make. We have the recipe for the sword, so how do we create it at the blacksmith, the forge. So you'll see there's a recipe weapon Daedric sword. I'm going to duplicate that. You really could do whatever with this. I'm actually going to duplicate that, and I'm also going to duplicate temper weapon Daedra sword. Duplicate, and we'll do our little period delete dance. You'll see if we scroll in here, we'll find recipe weapon Daedric sword copy 0000. Double click it just like before, and in here, same as before, make sure you give it a consistent name. Want to be organized. So I'm giving it an ID. This is the ID for the recipe. So recipe weapon, the situation. And then we're going to tell it what item to create first. So we'll say, obviously not Daedric sword. We're looking for the situation. So find that in the item. The number, the object count is how many it creates in your inventory. So if you're going to do, like, say, a arrow crafting mod, this is where you'd add to the value. You'd say 15 or 20 for whatever you created. I'm going to delete everything but actually I'll delete everything. We'll just make our own recipe. And my recipe is going to be exclusively in the form of leather strips. So you'll see if I right click in the required item list, say new, select it, and then over here in object, once again, we want leather strips. So I'm going to start typing leather strip, there it is. And I'm going to say count of 10. So I'm going to need 10 leather strips to build this. That's great, right? Feels like that's appropriate. And then down here, match conditions is basically how you constrict who and what can create this item. So in this case, the target is subject, so you check yourself, has perk, Daedric smithing, and if it's a 1, meaning if that's a yes, we do have Daedric smithing, then we can create it. In this case, I don't want to deal with any of that. I'm going to delete this. And what that means is that anyone ever can create the situation. If you wanted to make your own, you could say new, say has, let's just see what it has. Let's see, has perk. If you wanted to make it something interesting, let's say has perk backstab, that's appropriate to the situation. And then says comparison equals, which means is true, 1. So yes, he does have backstab, then you'd be able to create it. That would be the stipulation. We don't want that right now, so you understand the idea anyway. Just say OK. And once again, no, I do not want to make a new form, and yes, I don't care. And then our last thing to change is that Daedric sword copy 0000 from the temper weapon. Double click it, give it a second, name it appropriately as we've been doing a million times. I'm sick of saying the situation. Temper weapon, the situation. It's good to have the prefix there. This is pretty much the same as the crafting window. So created object, Daedric sword is incorrect. We'll scroll down. the situation, find that, count is the same. Oh, I didn't mention before, the workbench keyword basically says when you activate it, where does this show up? So where can I do the tempering for the situation? And that's at the sharpening wheel. If you look at the other one, it'll say the blacksmith, or sorry, the forge. I'm actually going to change the ingot ebony. You can see that you don't have to create new ones completely. You can just click over here, and here I can say leather strips, same as before, right? So one leather strip will give me the ability to upgrade the situation. And these two arguments are going to decide if you can actually upgrade it. So the first one says, is it enchanted? And if it's not one, meaning if it's not true, so if it's enchanted and you don't have the blacksmith perk, you won't be able to do it. So this is fine. This is like a default. All weapons in the game are like this right now. You could think of your own situations where you could actually, ironically, the situation has situations. It's good. It's deep, guys. It's real deep. You could think of other, stipulations you can put on it to say, find a way to make it race restricted or whatever. Maybe only orcs can do the tempering, whatever. Something stupid that is appropriately nerdy. Once again, I'm going to say okay after I've decided all these things are all right. I'm just going to say no, I do not want to create a new form, and say yes, that's okay. So now we have a new item right here. We have a first person model. We have a recipe for it and a tempering recipe. And so now the last step is to save and test it. So let's save it, file, save. And this has been giving me a little bit of grief, so it might not work. So we'll say this situation. Oh, this has been happening. For whatever reason, there's some window that's open that doesn't show in the view show open windows. So I'm going to say okay, and I'm going to try just Alt F4. Yeah, that'll do it. Now if I save again, save my ESP, that's good. Go over to go over here, go back to my game, open up Elder Scrolls, and in the launcher now you'll see a little bubble that it says data files. If I double click, or just single click actually, to turn on the situation, when I say okay, now I'm going to load up that ESP. So all the data that I've added is going to be in there. Hit play. I'm going to quickly show this. So now we're in the game. Run over to Smith and scroll down. I'm going to grab the iron category and scroll to the bottom. You'll see the situation. Remember, we started as a Daedric sword. If we go down here, you'll see the situation is now the iron sword. You'll see the text is there, correct? And we'll go in. So we've built that. Let's go to our grindstone. Situations there. So now we can upgrade them. It's awesome. It's great. The fine situation. And there we go. So it's Daedric. You look at the stats. You can see value is still 0. Damage is now 2 because I did upgrade it. And the weight is 15 instead of 150 as we changed it to. So that's it. That's actually building a new set of stats for an item, creating a recipe, and getting it into Skyrim. This has been Joe Pickup with SoMuchMonsters.com.